This week, I was back at the gym, and the gym I go to, where the cardio equipment is, there's a bank of TV monitors on the wall up there. And I usually don't pay any attention to them. I'm usually listening to an audio book to prepare me for whatever I'm doing that week, usually something spiritual related. And so I wasn't listening to the audio of any of it, but one of the screens really caught my attention. And it was one of the banners, that go across the bottom of the screen. And it was an interview. The anchor was interviewing this man who is a leader of a white nationalist movement. And the headline was about the white nationalists trying to recruit members and to get out the vote for candidates who support their agenda. And they showed this picture of Steve Bannon and this quote that said, "Don't worry if they call you a racist." Well, just telling the story stimulates something within me. And the rest of us, probably, yes. Watching that, I had this visceral experience, even though I didn't hear the words. I just saw the images. And my mind immediately went to, who the hell are these people? How can they really believe that? And my mind just went to really judgment and attack and everything that Brené Brown talks about in this book. That I recognize that my way of thinking is the polar opposite of what they believe. I just was like, I am just dumbfounded that there are still people who believe that. So that was going on with me. I want to own that, and I want to own that, even though I'm reluctant to, that several months ago, I went to see the movie Black Klansman. Has anybody seen the movie Black Klansman? I would recommend you seeing it. It's about a black police officer in Colorado Springs in the 60s, 70s, who joined the Ku Klux Klan. Through mail and through phone calls and things, and he had somebody else stand in for him at the meetings. But it's a very powerful story about that kind of division and polarization and really hate that shows up in our culture. And I have to admit that in the end, I don't want to give anything away, but when the Klansmen were planning to bomb someone's house and injure some of the black people in the community, it ended up backfiring, and they were the ones who got bombed and killed. Now, what I'm reluctant to admit is that I was celebrating that. And that didn't, when I recognize that and when I feel that, I'm like, it just doesn't feel good. Because I'm doing the same thing they're doing. When I feel that kind of hate or disgust or dismay, really, about all of that, then I'm getting engaged in that as well. And that's not where I want to be, and that's not, I believe, where we're called to be. We are seeing that show up so often, and this is what this book, Brené Brown, Braving the Wilderness, the quest for true belonging and the courage to stand alone. She talks about that. In the chapter that we studied this week, which is called People Are Hard to Hate, Close Up, Move In. And so that's the idea that we separate ourselves in these factions and these ideas of right and wrong, good and bad, and I'm right and you're wrong and all of that. And so we get into this sense of polarization. So I want to ask for a volunteer to come up on the platform. I want to do a little demonstration today. Everybody, somebody be brave. Braving the wilderness. Come on up, Jamie. You can do this. All right. It's easy. It's easy. So what I have here are two magnets. Thank you, Jamie. Two magnets. They're from the back of the name tags. So what I want you to do is hold them like that with their backs to each other, that way.
Okay.
First of all.
All right.
All right. Now face this way. So what happens when you try to push them together? Is there some resistance there? You're really not coming together. So now turn them around and face them the other way, and let's see what happens. So they immediately attract. They immediately come together. And so that's this idea of when we get polarized in the negative way, then we don't come together. But when we turn toward each other, then we are attracted together. So let's see, because we are energetic beings, we operate just like the rest of the universe operates. I want to try an experiment with you. So come closer and turn your back to me. Now walk to the other side of the stage. And what do you feel? Any attraction, any connection really there? Yeah. So now let's turn and face each other. And when we face each other, I really want us to focus on love. The love, as we are taught in unity, to behold the Christ in each other. To behold that in our hearts, in our minds, and to see the light in each other. And so as we focus on that, let's start walking together. And do you feel the energy
Yes.
that is attracting us?
Yes.
And as we come closer, we feel that energy that really is attracting us one to the other. We see each other.
Yes.
We come together in that sacred space of connection, which really is love.
Yes.
Yeah,
And unity.
you feel it. And unity. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you feel it. Great,
Yes.
thank you. That's what I wanted to example today. Thank you, Jamie. So as I said, in unity, we're taught to do that. We're taught to see each other. We're taught to come together. We're taught to behold the Christ in each other. And we do our best to do that. What I want to say about that, however, is that sometimes we are all too quick to do this, what we call spiritual bypass. Well, I'm taught that I'm supposed to do that. Every religious tradition, every spiritual tradition has some version of the golden rule. Treat each other as you would have done unto you. Or maybe the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have done unto them, right? So every spiritual tradition teaches us, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And so sometimes we think, well, I'm spiritual, I've been in unity for 30 years, and by God, I'm going to see the Christ in you. But what happens in that, when we do that, we bypass what's really going on in us and in the situation. And so what happens in that really is that the energy of love is not really as clear and as pure attracting us because there's that pain and tension still there, and we're pushing through it. And when we're pushing through it, we're not really available to connect at a heart level, at a pure love level. So what do we do? What do we do about that? Well, there's a great story in Scripture. There's a great teaching in Scripture in the Sermon on the Mount. It's in Matthew 5, where Jesus says, If you come to the altar to give your gift, and you find that you have something against your brother, then you better go and clean that up before you come back to give your gift, because if you don't, that brother may turn you over to the judge, and the judge may sentence you to jail, and you will not get out until you pay the last penny. Now, what does that mean for us metaphysically? If we interpret it metaphysically, which means what's happening in that story in our consciousness, and myeutically, what does it mean to me in this moment? And I would say what Jesus is saying is, if I am at the altar of giving and sharing my love with you, if I'm in that place of connection, in that sacred space, and I find that I'm not really ready or willing to connect and give that, if I find that I have something against you, then I best better go clean it up. Because if I don't, then guess who is the one who pays the price for that? Guess who is the one that still suffers around that? Guess who is the one who is imprisoned by our pain and our fear that we are unwilling to address and unwilling to lean into? First of all, it's us. But then we inflict that onto other people. Brené Brown in her book says, pain is unrelenting. It will get your attention. Despite our attempts to drown it in addiction, to physically beat it out of one another, to suffocate it with success and material trappings, or to strangle it with our hate, pain will find a way to make itself known. Pain will only subside when we acknowledge it and care for it. Addressing it with love and compassion would take only a minuscule percentage of the energy it takes to fight it. But approaching pain head on is terrifying. Most of us were not taught how to recognize pain, name it, and be with it. Our families and culture believed that the vulnerability that it takes to acknowledge pain was weakness. So we were taught anger, rage, and denial instead. But what we know now is that when we deny our emotion, it owns us. When we own our emotion, we can rebuild and find our way through the pain. Pain will imprison us. Pain will sap all of our life energy, pain and fear, when it's unacknowledged and unaddressed and not moved through. It will keep us in that place of separation, not only from each other, but really and truly from ourselves. So what Brené Brown says is she talks about the word compassion. When we meet it with compassion, then we can move through the pain that separates us. Kristen Neff, who is a associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, is widely regarded as one of the world's experts on this idea of self-compassion. She's done decades of study on self-compassion. She has a book called Self-Compassion. She has a website, selfcompassion.com, that is filled with meditations and exercises that we can engage in self-compassion. And so when we practice, when we notice that we are not connecting, that when, like from my experience, when I was witnessing that, and I was wanting to separate, I was wanting to run, I was wanting them to be silenced, I was wanting those people, those white nationalists, not to have a voice, and maybe even to be, I don't want to say hurt, I don't want anybody to be hurt, but I want them to in some way not have a voice. And I've noticed that in myself. What is present with me? It shows up, as she said, as anger, as rage. But what's really underneath that? What's really underneath that is pain. Pain at witnessing someone who could feel that and not acknowledge our humanness. So what Kristen says about compassion is that compassion says, pain is occurring. Am I willing to lean into it? Pain is occurring. Am I willing to lean into it? What we typically want to do, as Brene says, is resist it. We want to cover it over with addiction, whatever that looks like, through denial. We don't want to acknowledge our pain because it is scary. We think it's weak. But compassion acknowledges the pain. And she says that there are 3 components of compassion. They are mindfulness. Should be up there by now. Is this not working? Please advance that slide, Randy. They are mindfulness, which actually says, yes, pain is happening. You would think it would be obvious to us that pain is happening, that we wouldn't have to acknowledge that, yes, pain is happening. But again, what we feel is more anger and rage and disgust and all of those things that we're taught to feel, but what's happening is that we're in pain. I mean, pain, this hurts me, this hurts my heart, it hurts my soul. When I see people being treated that way, or when I treat people that way, I'm really in pain. Advance it again, Randy. Just hit the advance button, please. And the next is our common humanity. That we recognize that we all experience pain. Compassion recognizes that we all have pain, that it's normal to feel pain. It's normal to have fear. It's normal to look at these situations and to experience that pain. And we all have it. We all experience it. And the third component is kindness. Can we be kind to ourselves in our pain? Can we say to ourselves, of course it's painful. Of course it's scary. Can we soothe ourselves? Can we understand ourselves? Can we understand where the pain comes from? And so self-compassion begins with acknowledgement. I'm feeling pain. Am I willing to lean into that pain? Am I willing to understand that pain, that it's part of being human? And am I willing to treat myself with kindness when I feel the pain? And then the next step in that, as she says, Kristen says, there's no difference between self-compassion and compassion for others. There's no difference. So can I, in my experience, look at somebody who identifies as a white nationalist and not agree with their position, but look at them and say, pain is happening. Pain is happening. Pain is occurring in this person. Am I willing to acknowledge that? Am I willing to acknowledge their fear and their pain, even though I may not truly understand it? But can I acknowledge it and try to understand it? That they too share the human experience. That hate is not something that is innate within us. Hate has to be taught. And hate is experienced and taught to us and not a part of who we are. And can I understand that? Can I understand the pain that he might be feeling around his fear. It's not easy for me. But when I really choose to practice, we might look at that and say, pain. He's not feeling pain. He's feeling anger. He's feeling hate. It's easy. And can we stop and acknowledge the pain? And then can we treat them with kindness? Can we treat them with kindness? Can we say, I behold your truth? Maybe not to them directly, but to ourselves. And if we had the opportunity, could we sit down, acknowledge the pain, feel the pain, share our pain with each other? Now, this is extreme. I mean, it is it's indicative of what's happening in our culture. We find ourselves on opposite ends of the spectrum with what we believe religiously, politically, socially, and we turn away from each other because acknowledging our pain and our fear is vulnerability, and it can be scary. But if we're ever going to come together in love and move through it, create something new from it, then it's important for us to practice compassion. Practice compassion for ourselves and practice compassion for the other. And not engage in this idea of spiritual bypass. Well, I'm supposed to do it. If I was spiritual enough, I would do it. It's important for us to engage our own pain. And I know that it's not always easy. And what's coming to me now is that it's important for us to offer opportunities to do that for each other, to come together and have those conversations. We've talked about that before. We haven't done it, but I think it's important for us to do that, to come together, to support each other in love, and to have those conversations about our pain and acknowledge it and move through it and connect in those ways. And so we must turn toward each other, not away from each other. And the thing I was recognizing this morning as I was playing with these magnets, if I can get them apart now, is that when they're both are turned back to back, there is resistance. When they're turned together, they come together quite easily. But guess what? It only takes one. It only takes one to turn, and then they're drawn together. So my question for us today, are we going to be the one? Are we going to be the ones to turn, to practice compassion for ourselves and the other, and to truly make a difference in our world? Because it begins with you and me, right here and right now. So that's my question. And my hope is that we will all say, yes, I'm the one.